Commander Kim walked into the massive courtroom with his head held high, the Galactic Tribunal hall stretched as far as the eye could see, with floating platforms holding alien judges from across the galaxy. Blue-skinned Zephyrians whispered among themselves while the insect-like Vorthig clicked their mandibles in disapproval. At the center sat Vex, a towering creature with forearms and glowing red eyes that seemed to burn with hatred for anything human. Kim's boots echoed on the crystal floor as he approached the defendant's platform. Behind him, his loyal crew members Park and Cho sat in the gallery, their faces tight with worry. They had fought beside Kim through countless battles, and they knew their commander better than anyone. The man who had risked everything to save alien civilians was now being painted as a monster. Defense Attorney Lee stood up, her uniform crisp despite the long journey to the tribunal station. She had volunteered to defend Kim when no other lawyer would take the case. The evidence against humans was mounting, and most attorneys feared for their careers. But Lee believed in justice, and she believed in Kim. Vex's voice boomed through the chamber like thunder. Commander Kim of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You stand accused of genocide against the peaceful hegemony colonies. The evidence shows you destroyed 3 defenseless worlds, killing millions of innocent beings. The holographic display above the courtroom flickered to life, showing destroyed planets and burning cities. Kim watched the fabricated footage with a calm expression, even as gasps rose from the gallery. The images were convincing, but they were lies. Every explosion, every destroyed building had been created by advanced computer programs. Lee stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. Honorable judges, these images are false. Commander Kim didn't destroy those worlds. He saved them. The real aggressors were the hegemony war fleets that attacked human colonies first. My client acted in self-defense. She activated her own hologram, showing the true battle footage. Kim's small fleet of human ships outnumbered 10 to 1, dancing between massive hegemony dreadnoughts. The human vessels were tiny compared to the alien warships, like dolphins fighting whales. But Kim's tactical genius had turned the tide. The courtroom watched as Kim's flagship, the Soul's Pride, weaved through enemy fire. His voice could be heard over the battle communications. Calm and decisive, all ships. Execute Pattern Delta. Protect the evacuation vessels. No civilian casualties. The footage showed human ships taking heavy damage while shielding alien refugee ships. Kim had ordered his own vessels to be destroyed rather than let innocent beings die. This was not the action of a war criminal. This was the courage of a true hero. But High Arbiter Vex waved dismissively. Clever forgeries. But the tribunal has conclusive evidence. New holograms appeared, showing what appeared to be Kim giving orders to attack civilian targets. The audio was perfect, the video flawless. Only Kim and his crew knew it was all fake. Park jumped to his feet in the gallery. That's impossible. I was on the bridge during that entire battle. The commander never gave those orders. Security drones immediately surrounded Park, their red lights blinking ominously. Silence in the court. Vex commanded, "Another outburst and you will be removed." Lee continued her defense, calling witness after witness. Alien survivors testified that Kim had saved their lives. Captain Soto from the merchant vessel Lucky Star described how Kim's ships had formed a protective barrier around civilian transports. Even enemy prisoners spoke of Kim's honorable treatment of captured hegemony soldiers. But the judges seemed deaf to every word. The Zephyrian judge tapped his webbed fingers impatiently. The Vorthig representative's antennae twitched with what looked like predetermined judgment. This wasn't a trial. It was a show designed to humiliate humanity. As the hours passed, Kim noticed something troubling. Every piece of evidence against him was too perfect, too convenient. The supposed battle recording showed angles that no human ship could have captured. The audio contained technical terms that Kim never used. Someone with incredible resources had spent months creating this elaborate deception. Lee made her. Final argument, her voice rising with passion. Distinguished judges, humanity has always sought peace with our galactic neighbors. Commander Kim represents the best of human values, courage, sacrifice, and protection of the innocent. To convict him based on fabricated evidence would be a stain on galactic justice that will never wash clean. The courtroom fell silent for a moment. Kim thought he saw doubt in some of the alien judges' eyes, but then High Arbiter Vex stood, his forearms spreading wide like a victorious predator. The evidence is overwhelming. Commander Kim, you are guilty of war crimes against the hegemony worlds. This tribunal sentences you to life imprisonment in the Void Prison. May this serve as a warning to all humans who think they can act with impunity in our galaxy. The gavel crashed down like a thunderclap. Kim stood straight and proud. Even as energy restraints materialized round his wrists, he looked back at his friends in the gallery, giving them a small nod. They would know what to do. The truth would come out, no matter how long it took. As the security drones led him away, Kim's mind was already working. This wasn't just about him anymore. Someone wanted to destroy humanity's reputation in the galaxy, and they had succeeded in the first step. But they had made one critical mistake. They had turned Kim into a symbol, and symbols, Kim knew, were far more dangerous than any weapon. The transport ship carrying Kim cut through the darkness of space like a knife through black silk, through the small window of his cell. Kim watched stars blur past as they jumped through hyperspace gates. Each jump took him further from everything he had fought to protect, deeper into the forgotten corners of the galaxy where hope went to die. Void Prison appeared on the horizon like a massive steel coffin floating in empty space. The facility was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, its surface covered with weapon platforms and sensor rays. No ship had ever successfully escaped from this place. The prison's reputation stretched across every inhabited world in the galaxy. It was where political enemies disappeared forever. Park and Cho stood at the viewing deck of their own ship, watching Kim's transport dock with the prison. Park's hands shook as he pressed them against the reinforced glass. "We should have done something," he whispered. "We should have fought them." Cho placed a steady hand on his friend's shoulder. "Kim gave us orders before they took him. We gather evidence. We prove his innocence. Fighting would only make things worse for him." Meanwhile, on the human colony world of New Seoul, crowds gathered in the central plaza. The news feeds showed Kim being led into Void Prison in energy shackles. His head still held high despite everything. Signs reading "Free Kim" and "Justice for Humanity" filled the square as thousands of voices chanted in unison. Young Mother Yoon held her daughter's hand as they joined the protest. "Mama, why are the alien judges so mean to the nice commander?" the little girl asked. Yoon knelt down to her daughter's level. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, people are afraid of those who are different. But we won't let fear win." The protests weren't limited to New Seoul. On colony after colony, humans gathered to demand Kim's freedom. Video messages flooded the galactic networks. Former soldiers who had served under Kim shared stories of his heroism. Alien civilians he had saved came forward to testify to his character. Captain Han received these messages aboard his stealth frigate, the Silent Arrow. Han had been Kim's student years ago, learning tactical warfare at the Human Naval Academy. Now, he was putting those lessons to use in a different kind of battle. His ship was equipped with the most advanced scanning equipment humanity could build, designed to uncover secrets that others wanted to keep hidden. "Captain, we're approaching the tribunal station," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Bai. The young woman's fingers danced across her control panel. Careful to keep their ship invisible to enemy sensors, Hun studied the massive space station through his view screen. The Galactic Tribunal's headquarters was a city in space, home to millions of bureaucrats and officials from hundreds of worlds. Somewhere in that maze of corridors and computer systems was the evidence that would prove Kim's innocence. Begin. Deep scanning of their communication networks. Han ordered, "I want every message, every file transfer, every piece of data that mentions Kim or the hegemony trials, back at Void Prison." Warden Krex examined his newest prisoner through the security cameras. The alien creature resembled a giant mantis, with compound eyes that could see in 17 different spectrums of light. Krex had broken countless political prisoners over his long career. Humans were usually the easiest. They formed emotional attachments that could be exploited. Kim sat quietly in his cell, a cube of reinforced metal barely large enough for a human to stand upright. The walls hummed with energy fields designed to prevent escape. Most prisoners would be screaming or begging by now. Instead, Kim appeared to be meditating, his breathing slow and steady. Interesting. Krex clicked to his deputy. This one shows no fear. Perhaps he doesn't understand where he is. What Krex didn't realize was that other prisoners had already begun to whisper about the new rival. Word spread through the prison's hidden communication networks, smuggled messages, coded taps on cell walls, signals passed during the brief exercise periods. Kim wasn't just any prisoner. He was the human commander who had sacrificed everything to protect innocent lives. An old Zephyrian prisoner named Vel had been in Void Prison for 30 years, imprisoned for speaking out against government corruption. When he heard about Kim's rival, he smiled for the first time in decades. Finally, he whispered to his cellmate, "A real hero among us." The news of Kim's imprisonment reached the furthest edges of human space, on the mining world of Titan's Rest. Workers put down their tools and held a moment of silence. On the agricultural planet Green Valley, farmers painted Kim's name on their barns. Even on the dangerous frontier worlds where humans fought daily for survival, people found time to remember their imprisoned hero. Dr. Song, a brilliant computer specialist on the research station Alpha Point, watched the news feeds with growing anger. She had met Kim once, years ago, when he had visited the station to ensure their protection during a pirate raid. His kindness and genuine concern for her team's safety had left a deep impression. Now she turned her considerable skills toward a new purpose, finding the truth hidden in the galaxy's vast data networks. As the days passed, the protests grew larger and more organized. What had started as scattered demonstrations became a coordinated movement across dozens of worlds. Humans who had never agreed on anything found themselves united by a single cause, freeing an innocent man and exposing the corruption that had put him behind bars. Warden Krex watched these developments with growing unease. Political prisoners were supposed to be forgotten, their causes dying with their imprisonment. Instead, Kim's captivity was inspiring the largest human rights movement the galaxy had ever seen. Every day brought new protests, new demands for his release, new questions about the tribunal's justice. The warden realized too late that he wasn't housing a criminal. He was guarding a symbol of everything Inhumans believed in, and symbols, as history had shown throughout the galaxy, were far more dangerous than any weapon ever created. Inside the cold metal walls of Void Prison, something extraordinary was happening. Kim's small cell had become the heart of a revolution that none of the guards could see. Every morning at dawn, when the artificial lights flickered on across the prison blocks, inmates would tap a simple rhythm on their cell walls. 3 short taps, 3 long taps. 3 short taps again. It was an ancient human distress signal, but now it meant something more. It meant hope. Vel, the old Zephyrian prisoner, had become Kim's closest ally inside the prison, despite being from different worlds. The two had formed a friendship built on shared principles during their brief exercise periods in the prison yard. Vel would translate Kim's words to other alien inmates. Kim spoke of justice, of standing up for what was right even when the whole galaxy seemed against you. Listen to me, friends. Kim would say quietly as they walked in circles round the exercise yard. They want us to believe that might makes right, that the powerful can crush the weak without consequences. But every great civilization in history has fallen when it abandoned justice for convenience. The gods, mostly robotic sentinels with glowing red eyes, couldn't understand the languages being spoken. They saw prisoners talking, but they missed the fire being lit in their hearts soon. Even the most hardened criminals were looking to Kim for guidance. He had turned a place of despair into a classroom for hope. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, journalist Yoon was working day and night in her cramped apartment on New Terra. Her computer screens glowed in the darkness as she sifted through thousands of leaked documents. Captain Han's stealth missions had been successful. He had managed to intercept communications between High Arbiter Vex and mysterious figures in the hegemony government. Yoon's fingers trembled as she read the encrypted messages. The conspiracy was bigger than anyone had imagined. The hegemony hadn't just bribed the tribunal. They had planned the entire war to justify their expansion into human territory. Kim's brilliant defense of the colonies had ruined their plans, so they had decided to destroy him personally. Her first article hit the galactic news networks like a bomb. The Kim Files, how the tribunal sold justice to the highest bidder, spread across millions of worlds in hours. The leaked communication showed Vex discussing payments, falsified evidence, and plans to make an example of human arrogance. The response was immediate and explosive. On the industrial world of Iron Mountain, Lieutenant Bai read the article in her small apartment. She had served under Kim for 3 years, learning not just tactics but leadership. Now she knew what she had to do. Within hours, she had contacted every former student of Kim's tactical academy. The first meeting took place in an abandoned mining station on the edge of human space. 12 former officers gathered round a holographic display, their faces grim. With determination, Lieutenant Bai stood at the head of the table, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were planning. "We all know Commander Kim is innocent," she began. "The evidence proves it. But the tribunal won't listen to evidence. They only understand pressure. We need to become that pressure." Commander Jang, Kim's former second-in-command, leaned forward. "What are you suggesting? We can't fight the entire Galactic Tribunal with a dozen ships." Bai smiled for the first time in weeks. "We don't fight them directly. We fight them the way Kim taught us. Smart, strategic, and always thinking 3 moves ahead. We become the underground resistance that exposes their corruption at every turn." The plan they developed was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of open warfare, they would wage a campaign of information and sabotage. They would intercept tribunal communications, expose corrupt officials, and most importantly, document every lie told about humanity. Within months, resistance cells had formed on over 50 worlds. Each cell operated independently, using codes and tactics Kim had taught them years earlier. They rescued falsely imprisoned humans, exposed corrupt alien officials, and spread the truth about Kim's real actions during the war. The movement caught fire among alien species too. On the aquatic world of Coral Deep, the fish-like Aquarians held underwater protests after learning how Kim had saved their refugee ships. The crystalline beings of Prism Valley created light sculptures spelling out "Free Kim," free justice that could be seen from orbit. Dr. Song, working from her research station, had become the movement's technical backbone. Her advanced computers, cracked tribunal security codes, and exposed secret meetings, she discovered that 12 different species had been targeted for similar frame-ups, with humans just being the first test case. The prison guards began to notice changes in their facility. Fights between prisoners had almost completely stopped. Instead of the usual chaos, there was a strange sense of order and purpose. Inmates who had spent years in isolation were now teaching each other languages and sharing stories of their home worlds. Warden Krex watched the security feeds with growing alarm. His perfect system of control was crumbling, and he couldn't understand why. The robots reported no violations of prison rules, but somehow the entire atmosphere had changed. Prisoners who used to cower now walked with their heads high. The breaking point came when a new prisoner arrived, a young human engineer named Day, who had been falsely accused of sabotaging a Gemini facility. As the guards dragged him toward his cell, other prisoners began the tapping rhythm on their walls. Within minutes, the entire prison echoed with the sound of thousands of inmates showing solidarity. Kim, hearing the sound from his own cell, smiled for the first time since his imprisonment. The movement had grown beyond anything he could have imagined. What had started as one man's fight for justice had become a galaxy-wide awakening. The corrupt powers that had imprisoned him had made a critical error. They had given the forces of justice a martyr, and martyrs were far more powerful than any weapon in the known universe outside Void Prison. Captain Han's fleet had grown from one stealth ship to dozens of vessels from multiple species, all united under the simple banner: Free Kim, Free Justice. The revolution had begun, and it would not stop until truth prevailed over lies and justice conquered corruption. Dr. Song's fingers flew across her keyboard like a pianist playing the most important concert of her life. For weeks, she had been trying to crack the Tribunal's most secure database, the one containing High Arbiter Vex's personal communications. The encryption was unlike anything she had ever seen, layered with security protocols from dozens of different alien technologies. Her research station orbited a small moon, hidden from the main shipping lanes. Banks of quantum computers hummed around her, their processing power focused on a single goal: finding the truth that would free Kim. Coffee cups and energy drink containers littered her workspace, evidence of countless sleepless nights spent hunting through digital shadows. "Come on," she whispered to her screens. "Show me what you're hiding." The breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m. Galactic Standard Time. A tiny crack in the encryption, barely visible to most hackers. But Song wasn't most hackers. She was the daughter of tech computer engineers, raised on programming languages before she learned to speak properly. Her fingers danced across multiple keyboards simultaneously, exploiting the weakness like a surgeon making a precise cut. The first files that downloaded made her heart race. Bank transfers from hegemony accounts directly to Vex's personal fortune. Millions of credits changing hands just days before Kim's trial began. But this was just the beginning. As more files poured onto her screens, the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. There were audio recordings of Vex speaking with hegemony officials, his voice dripping with greed as he discussed the human problem. Video messages showed him coordinating with other corrupt judges, planning not just Kim's downfall but a systematic campaign to reduce human influence across the galaxy. Most damning of all were the technical specifications for creating the fake battle footage that had convicted Kim. Song's hands shook as she saved everything to multiple secure drives. This wasn't just evidence. This was proof of the biggest political conspiracy in galactic history. She immediately sent encrypted copies to Captain Han, Lieutenant Bai, and Journalist Yun. Within hours, the truth would be in the hands of people who could use it. Captain Han received the files aboard his flagship as it traveled through hyperspace toward the Galactic Assembly Station. His bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the evidence played. On their main screen, Commander Jiang stood beside Han's command chair, his face dark with anger. 30 years, Jiang said quietly. 30 years I've served in the galactic military, believing in the system, and this is what it's come to. Justice sold to the highest bidder. Han studied the star charts on his navigation display. The assembly station was still 12 hours away. But they weren't the only ones racing toward it. His sensors showed dozens of ships from multiple species converging on the same destination. Word of Song's discovery had spread through the Resistance network like wildfire. The Galactic Assembly had been in emergency session for 3 days, debating humanity's future in the galactic community. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the massive chamber, their voices raised in heated argument. Some demanded stricter controls on human expansion, while others called for investigation into the Kim case. Everything changed when Han's ship arrived at the station. The human captain requested immediate audience with the full assembly, claiming to have evidence that would change everything. Speaker Rel, a wise Centaurian who had led the assembly for 20 years, granted the request despite protests. From Hegemony representatives. Han walked into the assembly chamber carrying a simple data pad, but his steps echoed like thunder in the sudden silence. Representatives who had been shouting moments before now watched with curiosity and suspicion. At the Hegemony delegation table, Ambassador Thane shifted nervously in his seat. Honored representatives, Han began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. I bring evidence that will shock this assembly to its core. The trial of Commander Kim was not justice, it was theater, performed for the benefit of those who paid for the show. The main display screens throughout the chamber flickered to life, showing bank records, communication logs, and audio recordings. Vex's voice filled the chamber as he discussed bribes with Hegemony officials. The representatives sat in stunned silence as the scope of the corruption became clear. But the most powerful moment came when the fake battle footage was revealed, side by side with the real recordings from Kim's ships. The differences were obvious. The fake videos showed humans attacking civilian targets that didn't match any known Hegemony colonies. The real footage showed Kim's desperate fight to protect innocent lives while outnumbered and outgunned. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives from dozens of species rose to their feet, shouting for Vex's immediate arrest. The Aquarian delegate, whose people Kim had saved during the battle, spoke with tears flowing down her scaled cheeks. This human risked everything to save my world's children. We have betrayed an hero and called him criminal. Even former enemies began to change their positions. General Korth of the Hegemony military, a warrior who had fought against Kim's forces, stood slowly and removed his ceremonial helmet, a sign of respect among his people. I have fought this human in battle. He defeated me with honor and treated my captured soldiers with dignity. If this evidence is true, then we have wronged a great warrior. The chamber erupted as species after species demanded Kim's immediate release. The crystalline beings of Prism Valley created a light display that spelled out justice for Kim in 17 different languages. The insectoid hive queens, who rarely spoke in assembly sessions, buzzed in unison, their species' way of showing complete agreement. Meanwhile, across hundreds of worlds, the news sparked the largest demonstrations in galactic history. Our new soul, over 1 million humans gathered in the Capitol Plaza, singing ancient songs of justice and freedom. On Coral Deep, Aquarians created underwater light ceremonies visible from space. Even on distant frontier worlds, beings who had never heard of Kim before now chanted his name. The tribunal's credibility didn't just crumble. It collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Judge after judge resigned as investigations revealed their connections to the conspiracy. Vex himself went into hiding, but his luxury space yacht was tracked down by Captain Han's fleet within days. Speaker Ral called for an immediate vote on Kim's release and the tribunal's reform. The result was unanimous minus 847 votes for immediate action, with only the hegemony delegation abstaining. For the first time in galactic history, the Assembly had spoken with one unified voice. As the vote was announced, communication channels across the galaxy buzzed with the news. In his cold cell on Void Prison, Kim heard the distant sound of celebration echoing through the facility's corridors. Guards and prisoners alike had heard the news, and for once, the distinction between captor and captive seemed meaningless. The truth had emerged, and with it, the promise of justice finally served. The Liberation Fleet arrived at Void Prison like a constellation of hope against the black void of space. Captain Han's flagship led the formation, followed by vessels from dozens of different species, Aquarian deep space cruisers with their elegant curved hulls, crystalline Prism Valley ships that sparkled like diamonds, and even a few reformed hegemony vessels whose captains had joined the cause. Warden Krex watched the approaching fleet through his command center's view screen, his compound eyes wide with disbelief. The prison's automated defense systems powered down one by one as override codes flooded the communication channels. These weren't just any codes. They were direct orders from the Galactic Assembly itself, signed by Speaker Ral and authenticated by the highest levels of government. Inside his cell, Kim felt the change before he saw it. The constant hum of the energy barriers that had held him captive for months suddenly went silent. The metal door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing Lieutenant Bai standing in the corridor, tears streaming down her face. "Commander," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "it's time to come home." Kim stepped out of his cell for the first time in 8 months, his legs unsteady after the long confinement. Round him, other cell doors were opening as well. Vel, the old Zephyrian who had become his friend, emerged blinking in the corridor. Lights, hundreds of political prisoners, beings who had been forgotten by the galaxy, now stood free. The walk through the prison corridors became a victory parade. Guards who had once treated the prisoners with contempt now stood at attention, some even saluting as Kim passed. The man who had entered as a convicted criminal was leaving as a symbol of justice itself. Dr. Son waited in the docking bay, her usually messy hair neatly combed for the occasion. She had never met Kim in person, but she felt like she knew him after spending months fighting for his freedom. As he approached, she held out a data pad containing thousands of messages from beings across the galaxy. "Commander," she said, "these are just a few of the messages we've received. Every species, every world, they all want to thank you for what you've done." Kim scrolled through the messages, his eyes growing wide. Children had drawn pictures of him, poets had written verses about his courage, and leaders had sent formal declarations of support. A young Aquarian girl had written, in simple words, "Thank you for saving my mommy's ship. You are my hero." The journey back to the Galactic Assembly Station took 3 days, and every day brought new surprises. Ships joined their convoy at every star system, creating the largest peaceful armada in galactic history. The convoy stretched for thousands of kilometers, a river of vessels representing unity across the stars. On the assembly station, preparations were underway for something unprecedented. Speaker Ral had called for a full ceremony, not just to welcome Kim home, but to offer him a position that had never existed before, Supreme Justice of a completely reformed galactic court. The ceremony took place in the Assembly's main hall, but with all barriers removed to accommodate beings from across the galaxy. Kim walked to the center of the chamber wearing a simple human military uniform, refusing the elaborate robes that had been offered. Behind him walked his fellow former prisoners, including Vel, who had been chosen to represent all those who had suffered injustice. Speaker Ral's voice echoed through the chamber as he addressed the gathered delegates. Today, we witness not just the return of an innocent man, but the birth of a new era of justice. Commander Kim, the Galactic Assembly unanimously offers you the position of Supreme Justice. Will you accept this responsibility? Kim looked out at the thousands of faces watching him. Humans, aliens, former enemies who had become allies. He thought of the long months in his cell. The corruption that had nearly destroyed faith in justice itself, and the work that lay ahead. I accept, he said simply, but only if we do this together. Justice cannot be the work of one being or one species. It must be the shared responsibility of all who believe in fairness and truth. His first official act shocked even his supporters. Instead of seeking revenge against those who had wronged him, Kim issued a blanket pardon for all political prisoners throughout the galaxy. Thousands of beings who had been locked away for speaking truth to power walked free within. His second act was even more revolutionary. Kim announced that the new Galactic Court would be advised by former prisoners from every species. Beings who understood injustice firsthand would help design a system that could never be corrupted again. Vel was appointed as his chief advisor. Bringing decades of wisdom from his time in captivity, the reforms came quickly but carefully. New protocols required evidence to be verified by multiple independent sources. Judges had to pass rigorous ethics examinations. Their financial records were subject to constant review. Most importantly, any being accused of a crime had the right to representation from their own species. Captain Hone was placed in charge of a new organization, the Justice Guard, whose mission was to investigate corruption and protect those who spoke out against it. Lieutenant Bai became the first director of the Prisoner Advocacy Office, ensuring that no being would ever again suffer alone in silence. The changes rippled across the galaxy like waves from a stone thrown into still water. Species that had been enemies for centuries began working together on legal reforms. The hegemony government, purged of its corrupt leadership, became one of the strongest supporters of the new system. Humanity's reputation transformed almost overnight. Where once they had been seen as upstart newcomers, they were now respected as champions of justice, human values of fairness, determination, and standing up for the weak became ideals that other species sought to emulate. Years later, as Kim stood in his office overlooking the bustling courts where beings from hundreds of worlds sought fair resolution to their disputes, he often thought about his time in that small cell. The injustice that had tried to break him had instead forged him into something stronger. A symbol that justice delayed was not justice denied, but justice that would eventually triumph over all corruption. The galaxy had learned that heroes weren't born in glory, but in the dark places where they chose to keep their principles alive. Kim's journey from prisoner to justice leader had inspired not just humans, but all beings who believed that truth and fairness were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The end.